Welcome to 2025, a year of exciting upcoming presidential swaps in the US, and
Oh yeah, 20th of January. Donald Trump is in, Joe Biden is out. I only read about that today and then that deep fear struck me. But we'll see how that actually turns out.
yeah, I was gratified last year. I went to and I haven't talked about this with you, so yeah, this is something we can actually talk about. I went to a conference and I am eternally grateful for this. I was flown out to a conference in Luxembourg, in sort of Central Europe, not Central Europe. I mean, it's in Europe. It's landlocked country, but it's.
You don't have to show off your geography to me, Si. It's
Yeah,
fine.
good, because it's not going to go any further than that. It's a weird little place. We'll possibly get to that later. But on AI in law. Okay, so it was talking mostly about the implications of AI in the court system and in a wide ranging sort of concept as to things like decisions made using AI in immigration processes and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's quite broad, as well as the things we've talked about, like computer generated imagery and stuff like that. And while I was there, there were two. This was actually at the time of the election. It was the day after the election,
Yeah.
so we were all sitting around, or sort of the confirmations were coming through, and it was while I was sitting at the airport on the way out, I could see the tickers on the news, saying that Donald Trump had won,
Yeah.
and there were a couple of Americans who were at the conference. One who was speaking via video link, but one who was actually on site. But one of the things that they were telling me was actually that for all of the outward bluster and somewhat potentially dubious ethical concepts involved in, I'm going to say fascism because it's erring that way. Some of the legislation that was actually put through was very, very good on a legal standpoint, and they were saying there's sort of like four presidential enactments, acts. I don't know what the terms were around AI. One was done by Obama, two were done by Trump, and one was done by Biden, and they're all actually good law. So perhaps what we see externally, and as is often the way when you see the dramatic, big ticket, loud noise news items, and we'll come to that in a second because I've got a good news item for you from a UK newspaper, and I think you'll appreciate it. It's about fear mongering because it sells newspapers. It's not about the good stuff that actually gets done and
Yeah.
in the background that makes a country work and it is a bit better. So it will be interesting to see. I think my concern with that particular one is that I feel we're already seeing some of the impacts of it and I don't know if you've seen this today, but sort of things like Facebook or Meta as a whole, because it includes Instagram, are scaling back on their moderation.
Oh, it's the free speech. I found about that as I was scrolling through LinkedIn this morning for looking for stuff for my job, and then there was a bunch of articles about Mark Zuckerberg being a convicted pedophile and had gone to jail for the last 36 months and contracted like all these diseases, but it was like a mock Facebook post
Yeah.
because that's how everyone is now reporting on this news. And I saw like 6 of them, and I was like, "What the hell is this?" And then went and found the video of. Also, who knows whether that video was deepfaked?
Yeah.
Because they for someone who is so in the public, it's very hard to tell for some of these deepfakes because there is so much voice data and visual data
Yeah, I
of
mean,
him
basically,
to
we're
then
screwed,
generate
mate.
that.
You realise that, don't you?
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely realize that. I was only just looking at some more deepfakes not deepfakes. I was looking at AI generated images in terms of just humans in pictures and ones that they've made of complete humans, and the background and the person, it is becoming, before when we spoke about it, you could train your individual self to try and find pictures. I think it was earlier in the year we might have been talking to Amped about that, or earlier in 2024, sorry. We're in 2025.
Yeah.
And I think I felt that sometimes. It was like that uncanny valley. Like you just felt, you'd look at something and you would feel slightly uncomfortable. You wouldn't know what it was, but it was that kind of deep human feeling where you're like, this isn't natural.
Yeah.
But I was looking at some of those images today, and now I'm questioning myself. I'm like, is this an actual photo, or are they saying it's AI generated and it's not? But looking at the photos, it looked like family photos from 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was phenomenal, some of the content that was coming out. And I was like, this is scary. Like now we're getting to the point where if they can hide the digital traces of this, and especially with phones now, like you have a Samsung, you've got an Apple, all of that's like AI software into the pictures. So kind of how do you tell between the two? Yeah. It's a scary thought going into 2025. Not the fact that the technology is there, it's how it's going to be used. Yes. Is the scary part.
Yeah, I think there was an interesting proposal that was put forward by Leica, the camera company, which is actually they basically digitally watermark genuine images from the start. So we've given up on trying to show what's not real, but if we can prove that something is real, then at least you've got that extra layer of assurance. And I think we may end up going that way, actually, because it's easier to do that than it is to get everybody to tag, because unless you're going to make your own camera,
AI,
unless you're going to make your own camera, which is possible, and don't get me wrong, it is technically feasible to do.
You can kind of see, like, it's almost like the reverse of when DVDs had the like copyright encryption on it, and people would go through and jailbreak that copyright so they could then burn the DVDs and sell them to the black market.
Yeah.
Is that companies like this will come out and go, okay, we're going to do this encrypted watermark. If this watermark is on the picture, it means the picture's real. I can see criminals then reverse engineering that to then put the watermark on AI generated images, and then you have in the news cycle, cyber criminals have figured this out. These images from these dates now we don't know whether they're real or not, because it's got this watermark. We've updated the watermark, but between this 6 month period, who knows? Like
I think this is it. Is we're now into, I hate the phrase, but the new normal, whereby you see something, you're not necessarily going to be able to trust it.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because we're given all sorts of advice. You can go and look up all the advice about how to check an image and check sources and verify using multiple things and go to trusted and all of this.
Yeah.
But none of us really do it. Like, this thing pops up in your Instagram feed and you're like, oh my god, I'm sending that to everyone.
Yeah. And it's already like they're designed to be an echo chamber of your own opinions from what you're viewing. Yeah. So.
And I think the other problem is that reality is actually every bit as bizarre as I think it is. So, you get some really weird headline saying that some politician has said something, and you're like, nah, that can't be true. And it turns out to be utterly real. Oh. You're like, okay. There's a quote attributed to Einstein, which I think may have been disproved as being his, but I like it for him anyway, which was like, there's only two things that are infinite: the universe and human stupidity, and I'm not so sure about the universe. So I think...
Mate, I love those fake quotes. There was one from Isaac Newton that said, kids are always on their phones these days. That's fantastic.
But I'm going to say, you carry on. I'm just going to look up a picture and I want to share it with you.
So to continue on from the watermark breaking and putting on pictures, like where I can see that becoming an issue is the the value, because I was just looking for news articles, right? So there's been a bunch of men convicted in 2024 for generating AI CSAM, and
Yeah.
they're getting quite hefty prison sentences for all of that. But I can see it's almost like the rarity of the natural product that they're pushing, which is the CSAM material that's generated with real victims, being like a premium within that market. And so this whole like encryption thing, like that's where I could see the motivation for doing that, is those kind of niche
Oh,
circles to push
that's
that, to then generate the AI images to sell, maybe if they're selling them at a higher cost as a market product,
that's so
which is,
deeply disturbing.
I know, right? But that's like
Uh,
that's the real dark side of AI and where all this technology is going, right? Is like there's so much
yeah,
benefit, but then when you try and like put yourself in the shoes of a criminal and go, how would I use this poorly?
yeah,
How would
yeah,
I use this for bad? That's
yeah,
like where I start to think when I'm just like, I think it's because we've had so many of those discussions last year in
yeah,
terms of AI is being used to try and detect this stuff,
yeah,
and where I can see it being used on the other side, and unfortunately probably where will some of those conversations will go this year as we talk to more vendors and more people in the space that are researching it,
yeah.
that it's that prediction where it's going. Because even I read today, Nvidia is coming out with a desktop supercomputer for $3,000, which is just, have you seen that at all? Like,
I haven't, but then we've. Yeah, I'm going to say you're younger than I am, so you haven't seen quite as many iterations of the desktop supercomputer as I have. I actually, in my garage, and probably not working anymore, but I have one of the very first sort of desktop level supercomputers, which was a Silicon Graphics Indie machine, which at the time the graphics card in it alone was a 15 grand purchase, and the rest of the machine was, it was an incredible piece of kit. And when I picked it up, we were throwing them out from the company I was working with. Like, this is insane. I'm having one. But yeah, I'm going to say it's Moore's law, isn't it? We constantly increase and this almost exponential rate. It's slowing, I think, but the processing power that's available and the cost of it is coming down. The processing is going up, the cost is coming down, and we're getting these things. And then again, the new what are we on now? M4, M5 chips with the Mac. M4 chips with the Mac are phenomenally powerful, desktop processors.
yeah,
And the speed of them is ridiculous.
yeah,
I've got one M1 and one M2 chip.
yeah,
And even those are still blazingly fast. I mean,
yeah,
this is on the M1. It's still blazingly fast compared to, and you're talking about a machine that's, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years old, and it's still
yeah.
holding up brilliantly. So yeah,
Well, like until the AI models, right? Like when you're trying to generate that stuff where you need way more processing power, like anything else you can throw out day to day is nothing, right? Like we kind of hit a peak on where we couldn't generate a software program big enough to challenge the chips that we had. And I think with AI now, like when you're working with large data model sets, that's the next benchmark, right? Like your Cinebench will go away and it'll be like, okay, handle these multinomial AI models and see how fast you can churn through the data set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting again because you're talking about, well, there's a huge range of issues in doing AI, and like you say, churning through a data set and building a model. But actually, disk access is one of the you've got to have your buses that are handling all of that data to be able to put it into a multi-core processor and what's the chip called? CPU, VPU. There you go. I can do it. to distribute it, and then the memory's got to be able to pull it and push it at the rates that the process is handling it at. And so the technology is being pushed on leaps and bounds, and this is before we even get to quantum computing, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that's the leverage. Like looking at some of the write up for this, because they haven't released all the specs yet. They just like announced it recently, but the leverage that it has, I think they're doing a lot of it just in VRAM. So all the processing's done there, and then it's out onto a NVMe drive. So still quite high write speeds, but all the processing will be done. It's just pushing out the solution out of it.
Yeah, I think there's obviously parallel processing is the way forward. I mean, how can it not be? You're doing more things at the same time. It's purely logical. But I wonder if we're heading towards more potentially of seeing things like distributed parallel processing, whereby you're chaining together multiple machines, perhaps of a lower spec, but more of them.
So that's the NVIDIA one. They were talking about you can buy multiple units and chain them together.
We're there. I'll be intrigued. When the link comes into the show notes, I'll look forward to that very much.
Yeah. So, but like I said, it's just like it's a initial announcement for them. So it'll be interesting to see. You can just go on a wait list at the moment, but it'll be interesting to see some of the testing, like the early testing that comes out when they pass it off to maybe some vendors to run tests and stuff, and what their reviews come back and say. Because it's just they're going the way that Apple went, right? Like everything integrated onto the one chip. It's not a piecemeal thing, because otherwise you can't. Like if you're plugging pieces in, your bandwidth is limited.
Yeah.
So they're pushing everything in the same way. Yeah.
I mean, interestingly, I can say in the everything on a chip front, the Raspberry Pi 5 16 gig edition drops this morning, so you can have a Raspberry Pi with 16 gig of onboard memory as a system on a chip.
Raspberry Pi is now just like a computer from 2010, right? That's where we're at.
I would agree with you, except I think it's better than the computer from 2010.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, I've got one that sits behind my my telly, running a sort of a media server version.
I have a computer from 2010 running a media server, so it is like, it's probably better than mine. I had to get mine fixed because the RAM failed, so maybe I should just upgrade to a Raspberry Pi 5.
Yeah, there you go. It's probably cheaper than a couple of sticks of RAM, to be honest.
Well, it is, because it's DDR4, which is like hen's teeth to come by these days.
I was going to say, you offered to send me something earlier. I'm pretty sure I've got a drawer full of DDR4 kicking around somewhere. I'll send it in exchange. But of course,
I was in that transition period when I was looking to buy my new computer, which I didn't end up buying before I got this one. But I was like, I should do it. But it was right in that in between where DDR5 was new and it was so expensive, but then DDR4 was getting more expensive because they weren't making it anymore. And I was like, I'll just wait 5 years and then DDR5 will be cheap.
Yeah. I was going to say, this is the one thing about the Apple ecosystem is that I can't upgrade the memory in my machines because otherwise it breaks them. So I buy as much as I can from at the outset and then live with it. Which, having said that, my laptop is a 96 gig machine, so it's not insignificant for a little portable device. But yeah, so I'm going to say I'll share this window with you. Apologies for the quality of the photo; it was just taken in the supermarket. But this is where we're heading with
rise of killer robot fridges.
Yeah,
Boffin's fear AI devices going rogue.
So yeah, the prevalence of fears about AI are I'm not going to say hitting the quality press, because I wouldn't necessarily suggest that the Daily Star Sunday edition is
their font type of choice doesn't scream professionalism to me.
Yeah,
it almost looks like one of those slasher films from the 80s, and there's like the camera starts off looking at a newsstand about a serial killer killing a bunch of people, and it's and then it pans to the street, and there's like all the college kids just like having a milkshake or something.
Well, I was going to say, given that this was in the entryway to my local supermarket, a pan to the right would have given me the meat fridges, and if they were eating someone, that would have made perfect sense. So perhaps it's a horror film yet to come.
Those fridges, they'll get you.
Those fridges, yeah. But I can say that,
like, you just took the photo. I'm fascinated by stories and the headings and the kind of choices that journalists make for their titles that are clickbait, and then when you read the actual article, what is the underlying message? Because I feel like it's very like it's always been like this, but you see it a lot more in like Instagram reels or TikToks, where you kind of read the title and it actually has nothing to do with the content, but it's not representative because it's generally like AI generated, or it's just trying to be catchy.
Let's have a look.
Are you looking at the story?
I'm actually looking at the Daily Star. Okay, no, I think
your phone's going to track you and give you a lot more like Daily Star now, and that's
I know
that's going to be the end of your news cycle on your phone.
But yeah, fridges could lead a robot takeover of the world. Almost all UK homes have a refrigerator. I suspect, yeah, that's a fairly self-evident statement. 40 million fridges. Experts, however, reckon that as home tech gets smarter, they could soon be plotting to overthrow us. Yeah, I mean,
so like I'm currently reading the same article, and I'm not against one of the points in here. So worries, however, have been raised that the internet-connected fridges could be targeted by hackers and that they could talk to other devices through Wi-Fi. Now, that I'm on board with. I actually had an issue with... So I went and did a sleep apnea test, right?
Yeah.
And the breathing machines that you can get. So turns out, didn't have it. The breathing machines were really shit to use. But the majority on the market are Wi-Fi connected. Now, there's a whole ethical issue about those companies just collect your data and then sell them off, and that's like I found a security researcher that like hacked a whole bunch of them and gets you your data, which is awesome, and I'll try and find that and link it in the show notes. But those devices themselves, the Wi-Fi connected, so the doctors can essentially remote in and then control the breathing function. Now, if you had a full face mask, you could ramp up the pressure to push the air back, and then, like, I don't know whether you could kill someone, but you could definitely, like, disrupt their sleep for a long time and just make their life miserable. But it's those kind of, like, Wi-Fi home devices that I'm then concerned about, right? Like, it's not the fridge killing me, but if the fridge is the initial vector into a breathing machine, or even, like heart pacers are Bluetooth connected. So could someone get in via the fridge to someone's laptop, which then has the Bluetooth connection to the heart device for the pacemaker?
There's a beautiful murder case coming up somewhere in the future, isn't there?
Yeah. Am I giving the criminal the plot now?
Well, I remember now. I am so struggling to remember what series it was on television. But somebody carried out an assassination by pacemaker in this television series, and this was years ago. So it's not. I mean, okay, I think it was probably more complicated at that point in time. But you're absolutely right. I went through the sleep apnea test as well, although I didn't have a mask at the time. I was wired up to a million different things in the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford overnight.
Oh, you did the overnight test.
I did the overnight test.
I did the take-home one.
And if there's nothing that is going to make you sleep worse than being wired up to a million different things overnight, I can't imagine.
Not in your own home as well.
No. But I have one of those CPAP. So it's constant positive airway pressure CPAP machines. And mine isn't Wi-Fi. I don't know whether it's better or worse. It's actually mobile. It's GPRS. It sends data back via the cellular network.
Yeah, so
for free. I hasten to add. I both
so
didn't buy the machine and don't pay for the data.
some do, and then also because they have a little in Australia, you can put little SIM chips in them, and then some connect via Wi-Fi. And I was just researching because I was trying to find that security researcher that hacked the CPAP machines. But there was another one. All CPAP machines now have an activated microphone by default. It's meant to collect sound data, but it's like another Alexa just collecting your voice data.
I may have to check on that. I don't think mine does, but I may have to check that.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing is, right, is when I was chatting to these people, because I was like, if I did need to get a machine, I was like, well, I want one that I just control. Like, happy to have a digital interface, but I don't want it to have GPS. I don't want it to have Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
If it does have Wi-Fi, I want it to be disconnected, and I want it certified that it is not connected, that it can be proven. And they couldn't provide me, because it's all like really closed network of these companies that sell these machines, so none of the actual specifications are available.
Yeah.
And then to buy a machine that doesn't have any of this stuff was like twice the cost, because they're just not produced as much, so they're rarer to get. And there was like one company in Australia that you could get it from, and I was like, that's ridiculous. So it's essentially pushing people who need these machines into this closed off market where their data, like, let alone the kind of security concerns of someone hacking your own CPAP machine, the fact that these companies can then just harvest your data and you can't do anything about it is horrible.
Yeah. I'm going to say I was enrolled into it automatically by the NHS, so and it's really good, by the way. If you do need one, I'd thoroughly recommend.
Oh yeah, I've got plenty of family that use them and they're great. I just the privacy concerns is
But yeah, I mean, I log into my app and it tells me all of my sleep data, about how many what are referred to as incidents in sleep apnea.
Yeah, I think
when you stop breathing. It's great, isn't
it? I think at the time, like, to finish off on this CPAP rant that I had, just because I went down a rabbit hole last year about it, is I think there was also a case where an insurance company had purchased the data and then denied someone some kind of insurance claim because of it, and then obviously that person found out somehow. I think someone whistleblowed or something, and then they countersued for like, well, you shouldn't be able to access that data because it's private medical data. And that was an interesting thing. So I'll definitely try and find all this stuff with the CPAP machine. I might have notes somewhere because I really went down a rabbit hole on this one. But it was just super interesting because it's like a niche medical industry. Like it's
yeah. That is an interesting question, though, isn't it? Is that on the one hand, yes, if you are disrupting someone's sleep through a hack, I know how much better I feel for having been on it versus not, and how much less tired I am. So yes, if you can induce somebody to be in a state where they are more likely to have an accident, then there's that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, being told by my insurance company that, no, you were driving tired that day and therefore I'm not paying out on that accident claim that you've just put in, that sounds horrific.
Yeah.
And where I think interestingly, it's an interesting topic perhaps to debate, which is that you're wearing an Apple smartwatch. I think it's an Apple smartwatch. You're wearing a smartwatch of some sort.
Mine? No, mine's a Samsung Fit 3.
Oh, okay. So it's
so I bought the one where it's like it's not collecting much. It does step tracking, and I can get it to do my heartbeat, and that's about it.
So, right. Okay. So it's not as bad as it could be.
No.
But even that, it's if that was subpoenaed as part of an investigation into something about you, it's going to start handing over data that normally wouldn't have been collected.
Well, it's even recent one. Apple's privacy lawsuit with Siri. They had a $95 million payout. I'm just reading the article from. I never know how to say it. Is it Reuters or Routers?
I've always thought it was Reuters.
Reuters. Okay.
Reuters, but that I could be completely wrong.
Could be like the Australian slang. It's just Reuters. But who knows? So settled a $95 million lawsuit for Siri, which includes probably some health data out of that, realistically. But I think they calculated per user what that was for how many estimated Apple users they have, and it was like 0.09 cents per user. And Siri, and I can't see in it here. I think it said how much Siri made in a year, and I think like for Apple, based on the data that they it's not in this one, but it was 205 from memory, but I can't remember whether that was million or billion. But either way, 205 million is still above in a year is above the fine that they got for essentially selling their data or using the data inappropriately. So
yeah,
it's just, you're right. Like all of these things and how it's being fed into AI and where all of our data is going in terms of privacy is an issue. But then when it's then being used against us in like health insurance claims and everything else.
I guess the question is are we heading towards the dystopian future of what was it? It's Tom Cruise Minority Report, isn't it?
Oh, where they predict the crimes.
Predicts you're going to commit a crime in advance and acts. I mean, already we see it to a certain extent. Already we see it because there's predictive.
Oh no, your cholesterol's a little bit high. You're definitely going to stab someone today.
Yeah, that's it. But predictive algorithms for policing patrol.
Yeah.
So they do. I mean, they do that sort of thing. So, you know, it's to a certain extent. Yes, we are already starting to live in the dystopian future. Happy 2025, everyone. Yeah. So actually, that was an interesting one. If you look at
I found just as a side thing, I found the security researcher, which I'm very happy about.
Oh, so, good.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So the app, going back to the Apple thing. Apple will pay out $20 to Siri users, and users can submit a claim for each device they use. So it's not just an automatic $20. You have to submit it. Up to 5 devices, or $100 total. Yeah, ridiculous. Cancel the apocalypse. What we can learn from films set in 2025. Oh, right.
So yeah. I came across this the other day, which was like what films, what the future has been predicting for us in 2025. Pacific Rim. There we are. Repo Men. Reclaiming organs if you don't pay your debts. I'm not sure Thor counts entirely, but yeah. But Pacific Rim, you know. Large robots fighting in the middle of the Pacific to keep the is it Gaiju?
I mean,
he says, stretching his knowledge of Japanese culture.
Yeah, it is. Didn't I swear, wasn't it last year that Japan built the giant robot, the giant fighting robot, and then another country was like, oh no, the US were like, we'll fight you, and then they didn't. I don't think it worked. Was it Japan?
I mean, if anybody's going to have done it, it's Japan, isn't it? Let's face it. It's.
Oh no, it was a while ago. I was way off. It was 2017 when that happened.
Wow. Okay.
Well, those 9 years went fast.
Yeah. It's time is purely a social construct anyway. So. But yeah, so I mean, it's what 2025 will actually bring, and hopefully it's not large giant robots battling or nuclear apocalypse, or although again that's on the cards, it seems.
I don't know whether we spoke about this actually, but I did read. I got recommended a series, which is also a book. I ended up listening to the audiobook of it. But it was about the US's strategic preparation plans for like continuation of president and the White House, essentially, like Designated Survivor. If you've ever seen that TV show. But what it did is it went into the history of how all that started, when presidents essentially started to become targets for assassination. They went into the world and were traveling around the country, that kind of thing. And then the Cold War with, just like the nuclear deterrents that were going on between the two countries, because the presidents back then, I don't actually think they do this anymore, but for a while there was a assistant to the president that would always carry around the suitcase, which was the football, which had the nuclear armament codes and that they could launch nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And I should look up what that's called. But there is a series that you can watch. In Australia, it's on SBS, so you could watch it on demand. But it was just very interesting to hear how there was this huge nuclear arms race, and then what essentially stopped two of the explosions were just like people being really hesitant, not wanting to blow up the world, but it could have happened.
Yeah.
And then you see some of the dictators who are chasing nuclear arms who are just unhinged, and you're like, are we going that way?
Yeah, I think that's has somewhat scarily been perhaps brought more to our perspective with some suggestions of the annexation of areas of land that are of strategic importance, shall we say, like Greenland. So yeah, it's So yeah, put the title of that in. That sounds fascinating. I mean, I did watch some of Designated Survivor.
Oh, Raven Rock is the book.
Yeah.
So I'll find the link for that, and yeah, and the TV series is called something else, but I'm sure if you looked up Raven Rock TV series.
Yeah.
But very, very interesting. Yeah.
Cool.
And I think, we've kind of talked a lot about AI. I think that was one of the things we wanted to talk about when we jumped on. I think the other big thing that we both spoke about a lot together last year and with the guests that we had on was mental health.
Yes.
And I think that's, again, going to be, like I felt like, I don't know about you, but I felt myself and with a lot of people that I'm close to, 2024 was a rough year for a myriad of reasons. And this is me speculating, but I was thinking about this today before we were doing it. Well, this is my night time before we were doing this, and I was like, I wonder if this is the hangover from COVID still. Like, we had this massive pandemic, and then because for me, like, that was a huge time sink, right? And now we kind of lost 2 years, and then we've done 2 years, and for me now I'm like, oh, are we now coming out of this and there's a lot more problems that are symptoms from what we all went through as a society, and even as we're working. But I don't know, I felt like cybercrime rose a shitload in when we all went to remote work because there were so many workflow changes without any of the security in place. The world economics and countries that are putting tariffs on each other, and there's so much like more turmoil than there seems to be, and then that's just, it's flowing from like a macro level down to the micro community level as well. For me, it felt 2024 was like that. So I feel like we were only just scratching the surface at mental health when we were chatting last year, and I know we wanted to focus on mental health again this year, and we're going to have another host that's coming on, and he's doing a few talks potentially around mental health as well, that are going to be released. But yeah,
it's interesting because you said you said I saw this advert the other day. Informational video. Yes. I will share, and again I'll try and find a link for it that doesn't go through Facebook, but this is the copy of it that I found. I don't know if I can share sound, but let's just go with the video because it's documented anyway and it's fairly self-obvious. It helps if I also share it, doesn't it? That really helps.
Yeah. I see what this is doing. Who put out this ad? I'm assuming.
Sandy Hook, so one of the US shootings.
No, I know it's one of the... Is this like a foundation, though? Like the Sandy Hook Promise?
I don't know, actually. I think it is. I'll try and find out more detail. I mean, in terms of...
it is. Sandy Hook Promise, preventing gun violence. So, educates and empowers youth and adults to know the science to prevent violence and school shootings. So it's a non-for-profit US organization established in 2013. So I'll chuck that link in our show notes as well.
Yeah, but I mean just that the isolation, the fact that we're all coming, I think it definitely had an impact. I think it definitely had a feed into it.
Well, just to kind of to share a bit of a personal story. Like I got out of the military in 2021. I think September 2020 maybe I think September 2020. So which is kind of like COVID had started at the end of 2020 and then we went into it. But during that time, like a whole bunch of defense stuff, like defense is great sometimes and then not great other times. And I think coming out of defense, because you lose that familial network of peers, and then hitting COVID straight away, and I'd also ruptured my Achilles and had just had surgery as well, so I was like housebound for kind of 8 months straight. Ugh. But then the year and a half of COVID where it was very limited interaction, for me exacerbated quite a lot of social anxiety, and which is weird, right? Because like I jump on this and I can chat to you, and one-on-one is fine, and doing podcasts and all the content that I put out is fine. But I found coming out of that, it was very hard to go to social gatherings even with friends if it was more than like 3 of us there, to the point where when there was plenty of times when Liz and I jump in the car to drive and I'd get halfway and I'd be like, oh, I can't do this. And I was just like, I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, oh, I'm just tired, or I'm just like there'd be all this other stuff. And I'd drop her off and then I'd go pick her up afterwards. But then it was, I went through like an assessment process from post-military through Defence Veterans Affairs in Australia. And part of that's a mental health assessment. And I had all these things that I wanted to talk about from when I was in the military. But as I was talking through them, and he was asking me questions about what I'm like now, and I was explaining some of this stuff, and I was like, oh, like I'm way more fucked up than I had realized. But I think it was the combination, like, and I think this is typical for a lot of veterans to feel isolated. But then I think COVID made it so much worse, because there wasn't like, I didn't come out of it and then because like my workmates all still lived near me, but then we couldn't hang out and have beers because of COVID. So there was none of that getting out and still hanging out with friends for a little bit and making some new friends. It was just like, you're in lockdown, and that's kind of it. And I think that's where I was kind of coming at it from. 2024 for me was my realization year that happened, and it's still bad. Like I haven't solved any of that, but it felt like that for a lot of people, I think, that I spoke to, is that they're feeling it's hitting them that they're having to go out in the world again now, because there are workplaces that are return to work 3 days a week kind of thing, 2 days at home, and I think that's stressing people out, because they're like, I haven't had to do this for 4 years.
I think I'm going to say that the return to work thing is actually a particularly interesting one, because I work at home anyway, so it's not really an issue for me. But I know that for a long time, even before COVID hit, what I was doing in a day was going into an office, sitting at a desk, typing on a computer, and interacting with people for maybe an hour in that day.
Yeah.
And it took me, I used to travel a lot for work, not in the sense of I used to travel a lot like you do to go to conferences and go places and see clients. Like I just used to do an hour plus commute every day to get there and an hour plus on the way back.
Yeah.
So I was wasting 2.5, 3 hours of my day, occasionally in one particular job, 4 hours of my day getting to a place where I sat at a desk, and somebody goes, "You can work from home." I was like, "Well, great. I have 4 hours of my day back. That's 20 hours a week that I am not spending getting somewhere to earn a living when I don't need to be there."
Yeah.
And I think a lot of knowledge workers are actually objecting to that encroachment into their personal life again. It's not the issue of being in the office. If there was a transporter that would take them there to be there for, you know, the meeting that they need to see people for, and then they could be back in the comfort of their own home, sitting at their desk, doing the things that they do anyway. I think there's that. So I think the return to work thing, as well as the, you know, we've forgotten how to be social animals, perhaps, to a certain extent. I think that's quite a weighty conversation, and I think it's interesting the way that certain employers have taken it as well, because it's like some employers were like, right, we're going to save all our costs, scrap all our offices. My accountant did this, in fact. He doesn't have an office anymore. He's only a small firm, but they figured out that everybody was working from home. It was all going perfectly swimmingly. So they now don't have an office. Oh, okay, fine. That's great, and everybody's perfectly happy. Whereas others are now like, yeah, well, you've got to be back in 3 days a week minimum.
Yeah. I think beginning of 2024, when I started seeing it, I was like against the whole, and it's never been a threat for anywhere that I've worked. Like all of the companies that I've worked for since I've left the first initial cyber job that I was in when I first got out of the military, they're American companies and they're remote work. So started 2024, I was like, oh, like this sucks for a lot of people. But I think even myself, like sometimes I feel like even if you only interact with people for 1 hour a day, it really depends on what your home life is like. So if you've got a family and maybe you're taking your kids to sport and you're interacting with other parents and you've got social interaction in that sense, then work from home makes 100% sense, because you're getting the human need of human interaction, physical human interaction, because I think that's different from you and me being on a call. Because like realistically, like I loved when I came over and you showed me around Oxford. Like fantastic. I'm not saying this is shit, but it's way different.
Yeah, it's hugely
the catch-ups that we do. Yeah. But if for me, because like, so Liz has had a very busy year at her work, so she's been away a lot for trips for her work and is very busy all the time. And then I've just got the dogs. That my human interaction, I found, is very minimal. And if I'm not forced to do it, then I don't need to do it. And it was already an issue for me to avoid it. And so I definitely felt that towards the end of the year, especially like when I was going through all the shit towards the end of the year. I was like, oh, I actually don't have any work friends that I could just go for a coffee with and sit down and have a chat, because like, sure, I could arrange a call, have a coffee with someone, but it isn't the same as the like, hey, let's just go for a coffee because you're at work and that kind of thing. And I definitely appreciated having that in the past. And so I think it definitely depends on your family dynamic, where you're getting your social interaction from. Yeah. And that's just the individual human side. Like there's definitely arguments either way for companies on the other side, because my background now is insider risk. Insider risk is much easier to manage when you're in an office. Is much harder when you've got a remote workforce. Yeah. But then, yeah, like it's also how society's gone, right? Like you used to live in a house and you drive 5 minutes to the factory, whereas city costs so much, that which is where all the tech centers are, like knowledge workers, and like you were doing, it's now a commute. Now, if businesses were hiring you and then paying you for that commute, you might be less opposed
to doing an hour commute because you're like, well, I can listen to a podcast. I'm just driving into work, but it's part of your job.
Yeah.
So, but when companies are like, oh no, we're going to employ people from 2-3 hours away. Like, I think if they took that stance and they're like, oh, we're only going to hire people in the city and then no one can live in the city, they'd find out pretty soon that they're not going to have any workers. So there's like economic arguments and time-based arguments and everything else. But yeah, it's a tricky balance, and it feels like an us versus them. I think at least and going full circle back to what we were talking about at the start, is that sensationalized media. That's what the media is like. Like every article title that I read about this return to work from home, it's just like, oh, companies like are losing all this money, but then on the other side it's like, oh, they're making Brenda, who's like a single parent, travel 2 hours, and I'm like, oh, okay, like it's not clear cut. Like, let's have balanced reporting, but I don't think most journalists know how to do balanced reporting.
Balanced reporting doesn't sell.
Yeah,
it's that simple. And this is looping back round in conversation. Perhaps this is a good parting point for us. Is that it's boring articles that are very fair and reasoned aren't going to sell newspapers if you don't have killer AI machines. Actually, the headline the other day on the Daily Star was how to survive a Yeti attack. So it's clearly they know their target market, and to a certain extent, I have to say, I have taken the photo of covers of that newspaper twice in probably about 2 weeks, because it's caught my eye, because I'm human, because I'm a magpie like everybody else, and I look for the shiny. It does that. And we're a victim of our own success as a species, aren't we? It's like we pull it out. We want to hear about the gossip. It's very interesting, actually. If you two books, I don't know if you've read either of them. One is The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins, which is a fundamental exploration of evolution, funnily enough. But where Darwin specifies that the item that evolves is the species, or the species does it. Richard Dawkins puts forward the suggestion that actually it's the genes that are the thing, because the gene is the bit that gets transmitted and survives. It's not the animal doesn't, but the genes do. So it's a very interesting thing in that regard. And the other book is Humans by, and I'm going to get his name wrong unless I look it up.
Oh, it's not A Brief History of Humankind. Yuval Noah Harari.
Yeah, that's it.
Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind.
Sapiens, that's it. Yeah, sorry. This is what happens when you don't make notes before you start a show and then think of things on the fly. But yes, that one. But obviously, communication and gossip and things that build us as a society are hugely advantageous to us.
Yeah.
Because we value information, and that information means that I don't associate myself with someone who is a risk to me. Gossip basically exists to go, oh, that bloke who lives down the street, he's a bit dodgy, stay away from him. Means you stay away from the guy who lives down the street who's a bit dodgy. That sort of thing is actually a survival instinct. It's something that we as human beings do. So gossip for us is actually a hugely important aspect of our societal structure.
Right.
And as we build into larger societies, the way that we communicate these things is by the press and by television and by the wider word of mouth, and we still want the gossip. We still want the things that are going to stick in our mind as important facts. Fear AI fridges, and perhaps it'll work. Perhaps we will stay away from AI fridges, and perhaps it will stop them from getting world domination and imposing a lifetime of ice cream upon us or something. I don't know. It's just we are victims of our own success in this. But what we've done is we've then gone off and created a bunch of tools that allow us to make up stuff completely fictional.
That's the thing, right? Like gossip, you can think, and especially language has evolved. Like when us evolving with when language started, the gossip would have been to protect the tribe from external threats and when you think about it, maybe like a threat within the tribe would have been potentially someone with like a mental illness.
Yeah.
That was struggling, and so that was gossip to stay away from them, which I think's interesting throwing in, because mental illness has been a big thing that I've been looking into this year around the different disorders that exist, but also into the research that exists, and it's still quite infant when you look at it, because the human brain's such a hard, complex thing to map, let alone understand the actual thought process that's in it.
Yeah.
So then how does that play in it? And then you're right, like we've gone and create all these methods to create fake things, and then we've also created all these networks to then publish all this information very fast that we can't even fact check, because it's like the news cycle. It used to be that the 24-hour news cycle, and it would go into a static paper.
Yeah.
Whereas now, like, the news cycle's like a minute.
I was going to say, 24 minutes would be good.
Yeah.
It's not even that long, is it?
Well, you look at the attention span of most people and what reels are these days. Like, it's like 15 seconds. So, and it's like, how much information can you put in front of someone in 15 seconds? And then they're scrolling through that for an hour. Like, how much information are they taking in, and then how much of that's fake?
Yeah. This is good. I'm going to say, and this is a really good question, is how much of it are we taking in? You know, on one extent. I mean, I remembered that advert that I showed, or advert, I don't want to call it an advert, it's not an advert, informational piece.
The Sandy
Hook one. I remembered that from an Instagram scrolling session, admittedly. And, you know, it's obviously successful enough to have caught my eye and to, you know, to be memorable. But if you ask me what else I'd scrolled past, I have no idea.
That's probably a good point to end, because it's late at night for me.
Yeah, no, I can say it is very late at night for you. Well,
yeah,
for me, it's very late at night for you.
And that was quite a good recap. Like, we'll capture some more links to put in to the show notes, but we've got quite a few there. So
yeah. I think it was a good warm up for the year. I mean, hopefully we can get a few good podcasts set up. I mean, we've still got Brett Shavers to organise. Between the three of us, we singularly managed to fail to coordinate a workable time.
And there was quite a lot of travel towards the end of the back end of the year, which I think hit all three of us at some point. Because I think when we first tried to book that in, I was actually working remotely in Thailand at the time.
Yeah, you were in Thailand, he was in America, I was in the UK. Then he was in Japan, you were in Australia, and I was in the UK. Yeah. And then, it just didn't pan out. Yeah. But we will figure it out.
We'll get there.
We will get there. So that's certainly coming up, and hopefully we will have conversations again with all our good friends. I mean, I'm pretty sure that Amped will be on. I know, again, with the AI image generation, I know that they've just released modules to do with reflections and reflection tracking, which is really interesting and exciting piece of work. Because that, again, it's something it doesn't get right. So if you can start to figure out those things,
doesn't get it right yet.
Yes, sorry, doesn't get it right yet.
Yeah.
So that's another good way for picking it up if you have a reflective surface with him.
Yeah.
I am very interesting.
Optimistic for this year. Excited. It will be. I don't know how much you've been tracking, I guess, cyber threat actors, but as always, Christmas was an exciting period for our cyber defenders out there. And as always, we'll probably see that trickle down into cybercrime. So always. It will be a busy start of the year for those people, and I think the message there is to take care of your mental health. Like, I've been there before, and you probably haven't had much of a break, and you're probably running into a very busy start of the year with a lot of companies coming back realizing that they have been breached, and And then to all of our digital forensics friends, as always, there's lots of mental health issues there. Was chatting to a few of them over Christmas as well around, I think, a bit of burnout. There's a few people change different roles from kind of the criminal side into more admin roles. So that's always an ongoing concern, but it will be a big topic for us again this year, I think.
I think it's always going to be a big topic. The question is are we going to get to the point where there's something that's actually being done about it or not? The nature of the job is...
Yeah, I think it feels like at the moment, and where we were getting at the end of last year, is it's more of that exposure in those roles that haven't had it before. And yeah, if talking about it more on here helps push it out more, gets it in people's minds, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe some decision makers somewhere up the tree will listen and go, "Oh, maybe we should invest some money in this."
But I guess the message that we'll leave you all with, as sign off, is that if you are feeling lonely, there are plenty of services that you can reach out to. I know Lifeline's a big one in Australia that's reached out to a lot over the year. You've got Beyond Blue. We'll try and we'll maybe dig out a list, and we'll put those in the show notes as well.
We'll make sure they all get put onto the end. And indeed, if any of you are really struggling, pop onto the Forensic Focus. He says also in the vague pitch attempt Discord channel. If you DM me, I'm happy to have a chat with you personally. I'm not qualified, but I have been where you are. So do let me know.
Yeah, and also to the people that aren't struggling, like if you are working remotely, reach out to your peers. Is what I'd say. Like Christmas and the holiday period itself is a very stressful time for a lot of people because families aren't always a great time. So yeah, if you are doing well, then reach out to the others and try and have a deeper chat than you normally would, I think, especially at the start of the year as we move into 2025. So thanks everyone. We will see you in a lot more podcasts this year. Hopefully we'll make it out to a few conferences and can meet you in person. But I am excited to be back. Forensic Focus. I think this is our going into our third year, right? I think like we were kind of halfway through. Yeah. Well,
we've definitely done 2 New Year things. So
that's
far,
true.
So,
2 recaps.
So it's going to be at least 1 year full plus others. So
honestly, when I started this, I was like, this will be a quick year-long thing, but here we are, like 3 years later, and it's still going. So I'm keen to do it.
Yeah, excellent, good stuff.
All right. Well, we'll catch you all and see you in the next podcast.
Bye, everyone.